So between the two of us, are you Timon or Pumbaa?
You know, I want to. I would like to be Timon.
Okay, you can be Timon. It's fine.
But I'm probably Pumbaa.
I'm the brains of the operation.
Totally.
Okay. Wait, so that means I'm the one actually getting in drag and doing the hula then?
Do you have a problem with that?
Not if you don't.
Rock out, man.
Well, I'm Garrett McQueen in my boy clothes today.
And I'm Scott Blankenship wearing what was at the foot of the bed when I got up today.
And this is TRILLOQUY, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music.
It's Red Letter Day, Garrett.
So what's the big news?
I have now seen both The Lion King original
Oh, yeah.
and The Lion King live action.
Oh, you and I went to go see Beyonce featuring The Lion King.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. Oh, my goodness. I mean, you don't have the same nostalgia about it that I would. but hopefully you found something between the two movies, the two adaptations that you appreciated.
I did. The live action one, Jon Favreau's version that's out now, spoke to me more than the animated one. And I think that just must be because I missed that whole Disney era.
Sure.
When did it come out? When was
I think that was 94.
Okay, so a 24-year-old is probably not going to go and seek that out.
Sure,
unless they have kids,
Right.
and I didn't. But, because it happened with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, too.
Right.
Because I watched the original one with Gene, and the new one just did not measure up. I had no use for it. So
what you're making me think about is nostalgia connected to music, and maybe even specifically classical music, how most people don't have that. I have a bit of that nostalgia because, classical music has been a part of my life forever. But maybe that's one of the challenges of classical music is really fighting against the lack of nostalgia or lack of background so many people have in that.
Well, we've also talked a lot about how sometimes when you hear a piece for the first time and you're moved by it, that recording becomes the benchmark.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, watching Gene Wilder do Willy Wonka, nobody else can do Willy Wonka.
Right.
And there's music in that.
Yeah. And I guess you could say the same about the two Lion Kings because the Be Prepared in the original is much better than in the
I thought so too.
in the remake. But
What'd you say? You didn't think maybe they didn't want to mess with it?
yeah, because it's up there as one of those classics.
Yeah.
Disney doesn't have that many villain songs like that sound like that. There's Poor Unfortunate Souls. I can't really think of too many other ones.
Nor can I. But I will tell you there was the part that moved me in The Lion King was when Simba finally talked to the stars and heard his father's voice.
Yeah.
Because, and even just thinking about it now, I kind of get just a little, I can feel my throat tighten up a little bit thinking about it, because he had that feeling of uncertainty that he was to take up this mantle.
Yeah.
And that was a big example that was set out by his father.
Right.
And that's the sort of relationship that I have with my dad now, is that I have such reverence. We don't always agree.
Sure.
But I have such reverence for the choices that he made that got his family where we are, largely successful and largely positive family interaction that we have. And to think about the day that I might one day step into those shoes, it fills me with uncertainty. And so I could really key into that moment, that particular scene.
Have you and your dad had the conversation that Simba and Mufasa had about, when Simba my throat is getting tight, when Simba asks his father, and we're going to be friends forever, right? And that's when Mufasa goes into the whole, well, I'm not going to be here forever, but I'll always be with you. And that sort of, has that been a conversation between the two of you?
Dad is very reluctant to get too deep in emotion, because that's the time and place he's from.
Sure.
And he has started writing things in cards, like my mom died in 94 and he's been writing stuff like, you already got through the hard one.
Yeah.
He's like, when I go, it's going to be much easier on you.
Right.
And I got to call the BS flag on that
Sure.
because he's one of my closest friends.
That's really sweet. Yeah. Yeah. I envy that. I have a relationship with my dad, not a terribly close one. I mean, and he's around. I don't want to, my parents are still married and everything, but I was just, the black sheep enough to just kind of be on the outside of, I'm the black sheep of the family in many ways. So
Same here, but all I can say is keep the door open
yeah,
because, there's going to come a moment when that relationship will start. You'll see it.
I'm sure. Okay. Well, and the idea of guidance and mentorship and advice from those who are older is kind of the theme of my interview portion today. So I spoke with I hate to call him a kid, a young man named
Yeah.
David Norville. He is an oboist, a senior at the New England Conservatory Music, NEC, and he talks a lot about the people who have influenced him, some musical, including his teacher, Mr. Farillo, over there in Boston, one of my former teachers and his current mentor, Lacoli in Washington, as well as some of his non-musical mentors. So in this conversation, we bring up Joe Budden, one of his podcast heroes, the guy that inspired him to start his own podcast. For all intents and purposes, one of the people that inspired me to begin TRILLOQUY.
Yeah.
He talks about Jay-Z, aka Hove or Hova, as a point of inspiration. Yeah, he says some really poignant things in this conversation. And before we jump into it, Scott, I would love to touch on one. You'll hear him say, "I know myself and I know what I want for my world." That's a concept that I didn't even have, or I couldn't have even had as a 20-year-old, thinking about building your world. I was thinking more about, in my most responsible moments, I was thinking more about making it past this test or making it past this jury or this performance, but not creating my own world.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that at all? Well, what were you thinking about as a 20-year-old?
How am I going to get my car insurance paid this month?
Okay, good for you. I was driving around with no car insurance.
Yeah.
I have it now. I have it now.
No, all I'm saying is that, he's got a perspective that not a lot of young people have, let alone within this world of classical music.
Gives you some hope for the future, doesn't it?
The kids are all right.
Yeah.
I really think that there's many things that he says throughout your conversation that you should, write down and put it on a coffee mug or a bookmark or something. You know, he's, if nothing else, he's going to come up with a lot of inspirational phrases.
Yeah. Well, how about we jump in to that conversation? Where we'll start today is David kind of recounting how he met my former teacher, his current mentor, Lacoli in Washington, and what happened after that. We were connected through my former teacher, Lacoli, and why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got connected to him?
I got connected to Lacolian through Sphinx. So I went to the Sphinx Connect, Sphinx Con in February for the first time. I got a fellowship to go. So I went out to Detroit. And one of the seminars I went to was called The Daily Bread. And me being from the South and me being raised at the Church of Christ, it's one of the things that, that name stuck out to me. But also it kind of had like the name had a ring of like money to it, I've always kind of been thinking about ways to monetize my skills, so I was thinking that might be the one I wanted to go to. So I went to the Daily Bread, and Lacolian was there. He was the moderator, and his story was very much so similar to mine, and the way he spoke and the way he held himself kind of resonated within me, and I was thinking, man, I really wanted to talk to this guy, to meet this guy. There's a Q&A session towards the end of the talk, and I wanted to ask him, along with the rest of the people on the panel, what their experiences were with mentors, because here in Boston, one of the things that I've been looking for a lot is kind of someone to look to for kind of guidance or direction, or someone to kind of model maybe my own plans after a little bit. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. But I went to him directly after the seminar, and I went right up to him, and I saw that he's from Boston too. Not from Boston, but he's working in Boston.
Right, right.
And I said, I really wanted to ask you these questions. I showed him my name tag, and my name tag said New England Conservatory. And I was like, I really want to meet you. He said, I remember he said something like, you were meant to meet me this day. He said something so powerful like that. He said, this was meant to happen this day. Take my name down, contact me, and when we get back to Boston, I'll take you out to lunch and we'll talk.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a great time. It was a very powerful time.
At the Sphinx Con, one of the big focus is being an entrepreneur, and as you mentioned, monetizing yourself. Where do you plan to go other than music? Because it sounds like becoming an orchestral oboist isn't what you're planning on doing at this point.
Well, I have a few ideas, and I've had a few leads in the last couple months. I mean, first off, Sphinx really inspired me to really think that. First off, it really dared me to aspire, right? It really let me know that, wow, there's so many other routes that you can take, and there are many different careers you can build around your instrument, Me being an oboist, a lot of people think that there's only one or two things you can do. You can either teach oboe or go in an orchestra and play. Mm-hmm. But for the last few months, I've been kind of trying to build my skills and take on a sort of entrepreneurial mindset. So one of the things I've come to, my biggest leads, is I kind of want a career centered around media production. So first off, I'm in the process of conceptualizing and producing a podcast series. And actually tomorrow, I'm going to find out from this organization called National Art Strategies. They have this fellowship called Creative Community Fellows of New England. And I'm going to find out tomorrow, because I was a finalist for that fellowship. So I find out tomorrow if I actually get the fellowship or not. Regardless if I get the fellowship or not, I'm still going to go forward and produce this podcast series. Along with that, I want to create a business model around a performance series too, and be able to perform and tour around the country. One of my biggest aims is to be an independent artist.
Yeah.
Because to me that means so much. And one of my biggest inspirations is Jay-Z, and consequently Nipsey Hussle too.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about building my career as an independent artist, being able to connect with people at my same level who have certain skills and skills that complement my skills, and us build our career together.
Yeah. Anyone who listens to this podcast or knows me personally knows that I'm a huge Beyonce fan. But when you put Beyonce next to Hove, you have these two musicians who really carved their way and made their way. It's what I call freedom. And and the closer my relationship with, the closer I've gotten to Beyonce's music and her journey, since I was a teenager, of course, learning and listening to Jay-Z is a huge part of that. So yeah, shout out to both of them. I mean, what they're doing for blackness is so important. What they're doing as far as giving an example of what it really means to work for yourself and do your own thing. It's really phenomenal. They are so impactful. But I know we spoke before, and you also told me that you were a fan of the Joe Budden podcast, and he's actually my biggest inspiration. That's who I go to.
Definitely, very much so. Joe has been a huge inspiration for me in the last maybe year and a half. I'm actually seeing him on the 31st. He's coming to Boston on the 31st.
I know, I'm so jealous.
Out here. And I can't wait to I think I may be in the fourth row from the stage. Gonna be so close. Hopefully I can say something to him. Hopefully I can shake his hand, just meet him or something, because he's been a huge inspiration for me. He's part of the reason why he's almost the sole reason why I was inspired to create my own podcast series too. And just thinking about Joe, him being so unapologetically forward and blunt, and his ability to analyze the situation, deconstruct it, and convey that same situation with just such eloquence, but also
rawness
at the same time.
Yeah.
Rawness. It definitely speaks to me. Some of my friends will just know that some of my friends know that I'm very, very much the type to debate and argue and just go on a tangent about some philosophical thing that somehow relates to the current state of where we are and whatever conversation we're talking about. And that kind of stuff speaks to me, and it just gets me going, like, energy wise, and it really inspires me. Love Joe so much.
Yeah. Shout out to Joe, Rory, Maul, Parks, Erickson. I was actually I had the pleasure of being a guest on Savon's podcast, Need to Know. I don't know if you listened to that one.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard the episode. It was like almost 3 hours long, but I heard all of it. It was great.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. So definitely shout out to Savon and Steph and Alex as well. So already we've laid out Hove, Beyonce, Joe Budden, and all those people as folks who've inspired us and been an important part of what we do. What does it mean to you that there aren't all that many, black folk in classical music for us to look up to? Because people ask me all the time, who are your role models? Who are your musician role models? And I always have to go outside of classical music to name names.
I always thought it was a little weird that every time I thought of my own role models, I wasn't naming whoever is principal cello in Chicago,
Right.
or Leonard Bernstein or something like that. To me, to not have all of those role models in classical music to look to sometimes feels isolating. For the most part, it does feel isolating. I think there are a lot of negative associations, at least right now, that go along with it for me. There's always this understanding that, in the black community, one of the biggest things holding us back, one of the biggest hindrances is literally that the inability to access information, just not knowing things. There's this whole information economy out there, and some people are left out of that. And so I feel like because there's a lack of, sometimes leadership or lack of role models, I feel like there's a lack of knowing what can I do.
Yeah.
There's, at this age, I'm 20. I'm about to turn 21 in July. I'm about to go into my senior year at the New England Conservatory. There's a sense of personal agency that is more pressing and more pressing, and it's an interesting place to be in, because 4 years ago, I had to raise my hand and ask to go to the bathroom. And 4 years from now, I need to be in a place where I'm really making my decisions for myself. And so that means right now I have to know, what do I want to do? But before I can even ask what do I want to do, I have to know what can I do, And that requires me to look to what other people have been doing and what models have been laid out to me and what the paths are there. But at the same time, there is some consolation because those paths aren't there. That means I can become a pathfinder. That means I can become my own leader. I can just lay out something, because it's not there.
So before we sort of explore what lies ahead for you, let's lay the groundwork. So tell me the story that led you to playing the oboe and being a student at NEC.
Yeah, born in Florida. I was born into a West Indian household. My mom is from Guyana. That's a country in South America, eastern Venezuela.
Yeah.
It's geographically not part of the Caribbean, but culturally very much so is. And so, I was kind of brought up with a very strong work ethic. I was brought up with the understanding that if you can put your hands on something and mesh it and mold it to what you want it to be, but you have to put your hands on it first, and you have to put that work in first. We kind of grew up like not in the best circumstances. My mom moved here to the United States when she was like 20. She was like a single parent. That whole kind of stereotypical kind of background. My brother. So when it comes to music, my brother started playing flute. He's 4 years older than me. He started playing flute when he got to 6th grade. I was in 4th grade. I was in 2nd grade at the time. He started playing flute, and he loved it. And thinking back, I think for him, flute was an escape from circumstances. Flute was a means to an end. Flute brought him to places around the world that we otherwise wouldn't have gone. And I love my older brother. And I always competed with him ever since we were little. We always used to play video games together, and I always want to win. You always want to race. I always want to, let's go get on bikes and race. And most times I would lose, but I would nevertheless love the competition. I always loved to challenge him. So when I got to 6th grade, I also wanted to kind of join that game of music, get involved in another thing to be able to compete with him. Also, part of the reason I joined band was, my brother went to Disney World when he was in sixth grade, and he went to Disney World with the band. And so in my head, like the rationale was maybe if I join band, I can go to Disney World too. Because
That's
otherwise
precious.
we wouldn't have gone. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
never
that's
got to go
true.
to Disney World, but we went to Busch Gardens. I went to
Okay.
Busch Gardens like 4 times, and that was great. That was really great. And we got to go with the band as a band's school trip. So that was really cool. But I joined the game of music with my brother, and I think both of us had a just kind of like a sort of taking to it, and I think we had just kind of like a natural talent. No one else in the family is musical, but I
Okay.
think part of it was at home because my mom was gone frequently. We didn't have much else to do, you know.
And
We
gone
had
frequently, I guess, working all the time. Right?
at work, yeah, she
Yeah.
worked all the time, sometimes overnight. So we wouldn't have much else to do. We'd come home from school around 2 or 3 p.m. or maybe 4 p.m. In when we were in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
But we come home and just kind of just practice, practice. My brother took off quick with music. He'd be going to these festivals in middle school and high school, and he attended the Interlochen Arts Academy.
Okay. Yeah.
his
Up in
junior
Florida,
and
in
senior
Michigan.
yeah, junior and senior year, he went to Interlochen. My mom wanted the same thing for me, and so she kind of pushed me to practice and practice and do well, and I eventually was able to go to Interlochen as well. And there, I was able to study with this man named Daniel Stolper, who really, really changed my whole kind of understanding of how to play oboe and how to approach the instrument, and introduced me to so many different things musically. Um, and I really feel like I just leveled up and leveled up at Interlochen. It was a really great time, and I was able to participate in so many different forms of art and different mediums of art too. I think that's one of the most important things at Interlochen. I was playing music. I was also playing improvisatory music with friends. I would write poetry and read at coffee houses. I was acting in short films because it was a school for all arts. They had video motion
Yeah.
arts and dance and theater and all these things too. And so I was able to kind of participate in all these different things, and it was so great. Um, uh, we had a master class. I think we had a master class one day at Interlochen. I think it was my senior year. It was November, and this man named John Farillo, who you might know
Yeah.
his name.
Of course. Yeah.
He's one of the best oboists I think in the world.
Yeah.
He's principal of Boston Symphony Orchestra. He came and I played Easter Oratorio, the solo from the Easter Oratorio,
Mm-hmm.
the oboe solo, and I played it for him, and I think he liked it. I think he liked it. He had a lot of great things to say, and I had this really strange but really cool, genuine connection with him. And after the master class, he asked me if I was applying to the England Conservatory, and I said no. I said no because at the time I wasn't. Senior year, I was planning to apply to Indiana and Oberlin and schools that I thought that I would get more scholarship from because
Sure.
NEC is notorious for not giving a lot of aid.
Yeah.
So I told him no, and he says you should think about applying because I think you'd like it at the school, and I'd love to have you. And so that was very, very inspiring, not only because he said that, but because of the connection I had with him. So I applied, and fortunately I got in. And it was a good amount of scholarship, too. So I've been at NEC for about 3 years. I just finished my junior year, and I'm in Boston. And I've kind of got to Boston and, like, spread my roots, and kind of
Yeah.
put my roots deep and did my best to kind of cultivate my skills. I've been learning a lot about the world around me, but also about myself, too.
Oh, of
And
course. Yeah.
and so what's great about that is that I feel more confident within me, and I see the world more positively. But also within that, because I know myself, I know what I want from my world, and
Yeah.
so that's been leading me to pursue options, career options that aren't specifically in the orchestral realm. So I'm working with things around that kind of. For example, I have been volunteering with this local youth orchestra called the Roxbury Youth Orchestra.
Okay.
Roxbury is a notably predominantly black community in the suburb of Boston.
Yeah.
And there's this man named David France who's the founder of the orchestra, and the whole thing is kind of like help us build an orchestra in the hood, and so it's kind of teaching kind of like classical music to young inner city kids and helping them build sort of life skills and kind of giving them sort of like moral and emotional support through classical music. And so that's one of the things I've been doing. I mean, along
That's
with
really
that,
incredible.
yeah, and it's thank you, and it's been a great time.
You know,
Learning a lot about that too.
you're telling me your story, sort of reminded me of something. You know, we began this chat by kind of talking about, you know, some of our other media role models or people we pay attention to. When you mentioned that you were of West Indian descent, you have me thinking about folks like Kid Fury from The Reed and Jesus Nice, of course, from Jesus Amaro, and
Yeah.
you know, and they talk a lot about their West Indian upbringing and how in their households, you know, the expectation was to, you know, get a job, get something that is going to make you money. I guess I'm a little, you know, understanding those tropes, those stereotypes. I'm a little surprised that your mother pushed you and your brother toward music in the way that she did.
It's something that I haven't even fully wrapped my mind around, you know. Um, I think one of the biggest things is she wants us to do things that make us happy, you know.
Yeah,
And one of the biggest things she always says and always said is like when she was younger, she didn't know what she wanted to do. She was never frequently told that she was good at doing anything,
yeah,
and so no one ever pushed her to do anything either. She never knew what it felt like to have a dream, you know, and that's something she always kind of resents, and there's a sort of negative association there. She definitely feels the type of way about it, and I think because of that, that's part of the reason why she's always pushed us to use our skills and use the things that we're good at and pursue those things too.
yeah,
Because she knows what it's like to be in a position to not have a skill, or to be told that she's not good at something, or to not even have that sort of dream, and not have that passion to move towards something. You know, I'll be completely honest. Sometimes she's kind of like, all right, when are you gonna get a job? When are you gonna start making some money? You
yeah,
know, but I tell her, I'm like, Mom, I got a plan. I got a plan. I'm working these angles right now. I'm trying to do these certain things. I'm monetizing my skills to the best of my ability. You know,
yeah.
um, and I think, I mean, it's been a very difficult process, but I think in the end, we will all of us will agree that it will be a very beautiful thing that we've done. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, and sometimes you know the path just doesn't. Even though the path isn't clear, it doesn't mean the path isn't there. I talk about my story all the time. You know, I was going to be a music teacher, and then I actually ended up, you know, winning auditions and playing with orchestras, and you know that turned into radio and media and all that sort of thing. And you know, it's been a bumpy ride, but I think that's sort of par for the course when it comes to the arts, especially music, you know.
hmm I think one of the biggest things I've been thinking about, because you know, you tell someone that you're a musician or you're in classical music, and the first thing to think, oh, that's risky. But I
Yeah,
mean, you know, I've also been learning about like finance and business, and you know, education is an investment. You know, and one of the things that you do when you're investing is you minimize and diversify your risk. You
yeah.
know, and so
Wow.
one of the things I've been thinking about is, like I've been saying, monetizing my skills. So one of my plans is I'm working towards getting an economics degree after NEC, because I definitely want to be an entrepreneur. I want to work for myself. My end goal is freedom. My end goal is I decided what I want to do at a certain point in time. You know, that kind of stuff inspires me. Um, and I think, you know, being at classical music, being classical music is difficult, and I think it's risky. But I don't think it's as risky as people think. You know, I think there are ways to go about it, and I think the risk and like the pitfalls are that of the institution, not really of the types of people. Because I go to school with just amazingly creative, imaginative, hardworking people. You know,
Right, of course.
I don't think that if it was really that risky, these really intelligent people would be going through this, you know, or going into this like that. Um, but I mean, yeah, there are pitfalls, and there are things that I think, you know, my school could be doing, or conservatories could be doing, you know, to kind of
Well,
offset that.
well, on that topic, what do your classmates or maybe even some of your teachers think about the plan you have? Because I'm sure you have classmates just in the practice room really beating the block or beating the metronome, so to speak, trying to, you know, prepare to win that audition. What do they think of what you're doing?
Well, that's the thing. I haven't been totally vocal. I mean, firstly, I'm not a person who kind of talks a lot about like my plans or what I'm doing or what I've done and things like that. I kind of just silently work and let the work show for itself.
Yeah.
But I've kept this kind of quiet, my plans. I kept it very, very quiet. And I've spoken to a few people. And generally what they think is that, well, I mean, on some hands, from the vibes I get, I feel like some people think I'm selling out, or some people think I'm like sort of trying to quit and go a different route, or I'm not kind of meant to deal with the pressures of an orchestral audition. But some people are very supportive, and some people think like, some people say things like, if there's one person who can do it, Dave, you can do it.
I really hate that idea that the classically trained musician who does not end up only playing in an orchestra or whatever has sold out. And I get a little defensive on that topic. Considering my the way my career has played out, because I just consider myself a little more dynamic than the person who only my biggest critique of classical musicians is that the instrument you play becomes your principal personality trait, and I don't think that should be the case.
Yeah.
No shade to anybody out there, anybody listening, but
that's truth. I definitely hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I keep it so quiet. One of my biggest fears is that I say something about this to one of my teachers, and they sort of give up on me and stop dedicating as much time to me. Mm-hmm. The thing is, though, one of the amazing things about my teacher is that he implores that people get educations, people pursue other things, people trust in the process and go about things the way they think is right.
Yeah, and this is Mr. Farillo, right?
It's Mr. Farillo, and he was on the audition trail for 10 years. And within that time, he moved from state to state, teaching at different universities, moving his wife and kid around, just trying to stay afloat, still trying to play oboe, because that's really what he loves. The other day, I think it was a few months ago, he asked me what my plans were after I graduate and get my bachelor's. And for some reason, I had a feeling he was going to ask me that day. Mm. And I told him straight up, I said, after I graduate here, one of my plans is to go into economics, get an economics degree, because I want to understand more things about the business world. I want to understand finance. I want to understand how money moves. And I didn't tell him everything about being an entrepreneur, but I told him that I wanted to get an economics degree. And he was completely supportive. And it was really surprising. I was taken aback a bit. He was saying, it's really great people want to go on and kind of diversify or make their education more well-rounded. And he was telling me that his own daughter, who also plays oboe and who's in the Boston Symphony, is just now getting a poli-sci degree.
His daughter is already in the Boston Symphony?
Yeah, she's either a sub. I think she's actually technically in the Boston Symphony.
Okay.
As of like maybe a month or two ago. But she got a poli-sci degree and like a few other degrees too, along with her oboe degree. So that was cool, and it felt good to have someone that like that in my corner, not be completely against me because of the plans I have.
Yeah.
I don't know. People have their own ways of doing things. I think part of the culture is that there's a certain amount of like feeling of like being a rock star or a certain type of glamour that comes along with having an orchestra job. But the question is always, what is the reality of the job market? What is having a job really like? And is it really like being a rock star? Is it really like what you think it would be like? And is this what your calling is? Everyone's looking for a stage, but some different people are looking for different types of stages.
Right,
some
a different
people,
platform.
their stage is being a professor. For some people, they want to be the sole person on stage. Some people want to play in an ensemble. Some people, their stage is an sort of unconventional educational setting.
And while you're still piecing things together, you do know that the orchestral stage is not the stage that you're totally interested in right now.
Right now, no, it's not the sole stage.
Yeah.
I think part of it, I do feel a connection to the music at times, but there's definitely a difference between, if you're looking at it from more like a music business standpoint, there's a difference between like, entertainment and the culture. You know what I'm saying? That the entertainment caters to the whims of what, like the technical whims of whatever the demographic is, but the culture comes along with like the actual history and tradition.
Right.
One of my problems is, even from I guess maybe junior year on, I never really felt like I was part of the orchestra. Even now, it's an interesting take, but I feel like it's such a privilege to be a person of color, a person of color within, especially a person of African descent,
Yeah.
in the orchestra. But at times, I feel as though like these different nonprofit organizations that have helped us so greatly, it's almost like sending sleeper agents, you know,
Right.
sending
Right.
sleeper agents into this, regime. And there's only a few of us. And sometimes I kind of turn around and think, man, we're in greater numbers outside of the institution. Why don't we use our strength in numbers and kind of shift the market to a different place, or shift the scene to a different place, We can play
It's
classical music, but we can play classical music somewhere else,
right, right, exactly. It's so incredible hearing you talk about this, because of all the different people that I've interviewed so far for this podcast, everyone who is black kind of leads me to this part of the conversation, as far as like joint economics or power and numbers and all of that. Just maybe even just as an aside, what do you say to the person that says, "Well, why is everything about race? Why does it always boil back to race when black people talk about classical music?"
Well, man, it's such a large question, and the first thing I would say is that anything that has to do with money is going to boil back to race. Anything that has to do with like culture or socioeconomic status can boil back to race, because race, like if you're talking about racism or sexism or homophobia, they're all mechanisms of capitalism, And so a lot of that stuff's going to boil back to race. That'll be the first thing I said. But things going to boil back to race because it's there's a more visceral connection. At least personally speaking, I feel a more visceral connection to a certain type of music depending on who's playing it. When I went to Sphinx, that was the first time I went to Sphinx, and when I heard the Sphinx Orchestra, that was the most beautiful classical music I've ever heard ever. And it's because I look on stage and I can see Joseph Conyers, I can see Jess McJunkins, I saw
Yeah, shout out to them.
I
Yeah.
saw David France, I saw Damari McGill, people like
Yep.
that on stage, and it was very, 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 very powerful connection, But I mean, there's always the understanding of intrinsic bias, feeling of isolation, and one of the things I actually started thinking about my junior year is after I started playing so many concerts in Interlochen, I would look into the audience, while on stage, in mid concert, and look into the audience to see who was out there, you know. I wouldn't see anyone who looked like me. I
Yeah.
wouldn't feel like I was adding to the culture. Whose culture am I adding to when I'm like kind of supporting the institution? I would look at the chairs and look at the architecture of the auditorium, and I would start thinking, who paid for this?
Yeah.
And what do they look like? Where are they from? You know, I mean, I wrote a paper about classical music being one of the last vertices of white power that has been unchallenged.
Ooh, wow, yes.
It's a foothold of white power that has been unchallenged, and I think because of that, because of this Euro-American space that has been created, it's always going to boil back to race. If you walk downtown by NEC, you'll see New England Conservatory, Jordan Hall building. You'll see Boston Symphony on the next block. The architecture is neo-Renaissance, European architecture. They're creating this whole space and this whole block that is referential of Europe.
Yeah.
What does it mean to see a black body in that space? What does it mean to go into Jordan Hall, turn right, go around the corner, and see a big statue of Beethoven, and see Mahler on the wall? They're creating a different space that has these, unconscious, these sort of implied references, And so these physical representations of power mean something. And so when another person who doesn't really coincide with that representation, it enters that space, it means something. And it's quite powerful. And that's why it's powerful to have, black people in orchestra and have organizations like Sphinx and these like pipeline programs. But at the same time, it's going to be, it's because it's significant, there are always going to be positive, negative implications and repercussions too.
Right.
So it's going to boil back down to race because it's so. I think it's so intrinsically rooted into what we understand it to be. What we understand, classical music to be, or the culture of it.
Yeah, I really
Separating
agree
that
with
from
that.
entertainment.
Yeah, I definitely do, and as it applies to me, as when it came when it came to the point of me choosing whether to stay on the stage or go behind the mic, I really had to deal with the idea that wow, if I let go my seat with this orchestra, I was playing with the Knoxville Symphony. Black people come into this show will see zero black folks on this stage, but conversations like these are just deserve so much more attention, and I don't think they've been in the limelight in classical music culture, and I just felt like my personal charge was so much bigger. So I really, again, I really appreciate you opening up these ideas and exposing these thoughts to people who may not be thinking about them otherwise.
Hey, well, thank you. I never really thought about what that meant for you to leave the orchestra, to be the last black person in the orchestra. That's a very, very difficult position to be in. Even
Right.
thinking about it personally, I'm thinking, wow, like, what role am I serving, and what could my bigger role be? But what are the implications of me leaving right now?
Right,
But then that
right.
kind of leads us thinking, like, well, this is so much bigger than me right now. If
Playing the
this is
long
the
game,
biggest,
exactly.
right? Wow,
Um,
that's a difficult position.
the very first person I interviewed for this podcast, shout out to Marion Dooley. He reached out to me, and if for folks who've already listened to that episode, they know. But he reached out to me because I subbed with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra first time in Minnesota. He saw me on stage, and that was just such a big moment for him. So we've become homies, and we talk. And one of the things we talked about in his episode of Trilloquy is the idea of access to options. He went to an HBCU down in Oklahoma, and he was talking about how while his marching band experience and all that was so rich and so full, he just didn't really have a picture from that institution of what some of the next steps could be. And that's one of the things that breaks my heart about our HBCUs. But at the same time, it kind of seems like that applies to the more traditional conservatory culture. I mean, what options are laid before you at NEC that really give you a clearer picture of what a career outside of the orchestral hall or the teaching facility could be? Do you think that is set up at your school? Not to say anything about NEC, of course, but
Not entirely. A lot of the, well, I mean, firstly, I'll say I think one of the biggest things about conservatory culture is that they have this retention rate of graduates, where people are coming back to the school and coming back to the school because they don't really have something figured out yet. There's an understanding that people kind of go to school until they get a job. And I think speaking to NEC, because I mean, I go there, like, there are a lot of people who go for 4 years, come back for the master's, go 2 years, come back for a graduate diploma or artist diploma or things like that. There isn't totally, there's not really a system in place that allows for career planning. At least something that's significant enough. They have this department called the Entrepreneurial Musicianship Department. And I think it's a great start, and I think it's a great initiative. There's a required class in which they teach us briefly about like marketing and like business options, and teach us about grants and things like that. But I don't think there's any sort of curriculum or any sort of program at NEC that helps us with career planning. That's definitely one of the biggest pitfalls I found in a conservatory.
So let's fast forward. Let's say 20. You're 20 years old now. So when you're 40 years old, and you're just in the thick of your career, and things are going great. Everything is really successful. What would be your charge to both HBCUs, state schools, even conservatories? What would be your charge to them as far as helping young musicians navigate more diverse careers in classical music?
I think one of the biggest things I would recommend would be adapting their own version of a co-op program. Northeastern University, one of the best things about their school is that a lot of their degrees are 5-year degrees, in which 4 years of schooling, and you have an additional year in which you're in the workforce. You're actually out there doing something within the workforce. I think the conservatory can do a great job, because I think right now the conservatory does a great job at controlling the pace and controlling the kind of look of the music, like the world of musicians.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that conservatories are great at controlling the job market. I think what they could do is, I think conservatories could create more jobs for musicians, and within doing so, will create jobs for people to facilitate like these new venues and these new performance opportunities. But I also think there are new jobs that could be created that are more like niche, that are more specific. That's not just simply performance, but integrates performance into a different type of artistic medium. I think things are too kind of black and white. I think it's too much so like, okay, just go and perform. Okay, now just do education. There's definitely a lot of middle ground there. I think the biggest thing that conservatories can do, or maybe HBCUs can do, when it comes to laying out some sort of career path, is introducing co-op programs. One of the biggest things I learned from Lacolian, since I've been his mentee the last couple months, is that you have to fail, and you have to fail fast. But in order to fail fast or fail, you have to try something. So I think for these new opportunities, I think creating new opportunities within like a co-op program for these different schools would allow people to actually get out there and say, wow, I don't like this at all. It's a good thing I tried it within this safe space, because there's a lot of cushion that comes along with being an institution. You can try things and fail things. You fail and crash and burn, but with padding. That's one of the biggest things. People kind of get out of college, and there's a good amount of time before they kind of actualize themselves and figure out what they like, what they don't like, where they're going. And I think schools can facilitate that a little bit.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that padding, that's something that can't be overlooked enough. One of the things I attribute my success as far as getting into orchestras is that I didn't have that safety net. I had to win an audition, or I had to starve. And that padding, that safety net, is so important. And of course, we could get into a conversation about what students actually do have that padding, and the relationship between generational wealth and all of that sort of thing. But yeah, it's so important. All right, well, David, this has really been great. For anyone who wants to reach out to you or learn more about you, how can they do that?
So at this point in time, the best way to reach out to me would be through email, or actually through Instagram. So my email is davidnorville.obo@gmail.com. And my Instagram is @madcooldave. I have a podcast in the works of production. It's in pre-production right now. And I mean, there's going to be more information about that soon. But I actually have to wait literally until tomorrow to figure out what the next step is for that, because through this fellowship, I'll be able to produce the podcast. It'll be in front of a live studio audience, and looking at 5 episodes within the next year or so.
Excellent.
For 2020.
Well, tomorrow, whenever you get the information you need, be sure to send that to me. And by the time this episode of TRILLOQUY airs, I'll be able to do all of those shout outs for your project in post.
Okay, we'll do. Definitely we'll do that.
All right, well, David, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Garrett, thanks for having me. It was a really great time, great experience.
David Norville in conversation with Garrett McQueen here on TRILLOQUY.
David definitely hit on some things that I want to touch on again, but just as an update, he told me last week that he received not one but 2 fellowships, one from the National Art Strategies and the second from the Creative Community Fellows of New England. And what he plans to do with the money from those 2 fellowships is to begin the project. You heard him talk a little bit about, he's calling the project AIM, AIM. It stands for Artists Initiative Movement, podcast series that he's working on, I believe still in production. But we're definitely going to be hearing more from David Norville. Such a brilliant mind and such an innovative mind for such a young person. I definitely wasn't engaged in the conversations that he's ready to engage when I was 20. How about you?
Well, first off, I have to say that, listening back to you and I going, talking about things in this podcast, I listen to myself and I go, man, I say and a lot, and it doesn't sound good to my ear.
Okay.
And then I hear you two talk, and everything that he said sounded fully formed.
Yeah.
And, well thought out and everything. So immediately I'm thinking that this guy's like 30 years old.
Right.
And
Right.
to hear that he's 20, I was like, the kids are all right. The kids are all right. And it's going to be fine. With people like him, he will be a mentor to many, many people.
No.
And you can also be inspired by, anyone can be inspired by anyone. So I was inspired by David.
I'm curious. I'm curious what you think. You say the kids are okay. The next generation is going to make it. Well, I don't think he's going to end up on the orchestral stage. Do you think the true talent is moving away from classical music?
I don't know. I think that I don't see why he couldn't be an influence from the stage. That he sounds like he's got so many irons in the fire now.
Right.
That doing more of that and having more, even more irons going into the fire, I don't think, it doesn't sound like that's going to hinder him.
Yeah.
He will find another hour in the day somehow. And he talks about all these issues that we have in this podcast. We're talking about access.
Yeah.
From very early on, just listening to Lee Kuntz, making a way where there is no way.
Yeah.
So all of these things are reverberating over and over and over again.
What did you think about what he said concerning classical music as like the last bastion of white supremacy or whatever?
Shots fired. Shots fired.
So when I interviewed him, I actually that was one of my big takeaways, and I put it on my Facebook that I had interviewed someone who said that, and boy, people were really fired up about that. And I just think that's a very poignant thing again for such a young person to say. And when you think about it, he's not too far off the mark, at least, from my perspective.
No, and I think that that's the important thing to remember is that we need to listen to these other perspectives. Because not only will it, if you have an appreciation for somebody else's plight, I think it improves your own.
Right, right.
At least I hope.
Yeah.
I would hope.
So yeah, shout out to David Norville.
That kid's going places,
I can't wait to meet him in person. I'm so glad again that Lacolian, my first teacher, connected the two of us, and I'm looking forward to seeing the incredible growth that I'm sure Mr. David Norville is gonna be enjoying over the next few years. Just one last thing, a quote from him I wrote down is, "I know myself and I know what I want for my world." Isn't that a beautiful sort of concept, just knowing what you want your world to look like?
In the course of this interview, David laid out all sorts of sentences that could go on a T-shirt,
Yeah.
or your bumper sticker or something like that. For me, if there's someone who can do it, it's you, David.
Yeah.
When he said that somebody told him, "Well, David, I'm gonna echo that back to you. I think that everything is open to you."
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, so next time we're going to hear from an arts administrator. Do you know anything about arts administration or what that entails?
Just what I do at my cubicle.
So her name is Quanice Floyd. She does a lot of different things, including running the Arts Administrators of Color Network. So in our chat, we talk a lot about the indigenous music and the indigenous culture that we overlook far too often, as well as teaching kids music and how music education should mirror culture, and then how all of those concepts play into the work she does as an arts administrator. So you'll definitely want to check out Quanice Floyd next time on TRILLOQUY. And before we let you go, I'd like to announce that our website is live. You can catch up on past opuses of TRILLOQUY and keep up with the new ones by visiting trilloquy.org. That's TRILLOQUY.org.